Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and boy, do I ever appreciate you being with me. Now, let me remind you again, and let me ask again that you please hit the subscribe button and the like button. This really helps. All right, it helps my channel to grow. It helps more and more people be called to the channel. Share the videos, all right? I got to tell you this. Um, I am hearing from more and more and more people all the time, virtually every single day, people that I have never heard from before. The great majority of my book orders right now are from people that I have never heard of before, who have never ordered books before. You know what that says? I got to say this. Just the other day on Facebook, this detractor, that's this objector, he said, "Well, anybody can see that the full preterist view is dying out." I just nearly fell over in my chair laughing. That's what you call whistling by the graveyard, and those of you who are really younger probably won't grasp that, but nonetheless, ask an older guy. Uh, and it's kind of like Doug Wilson rather sarcastically saying, well, there are at least 14 full preterists. And it's kind of like Sam Frost sarcastically commenting on how preterism is dying. Folks, people who are saying that are literally, number one, totally ignorant, or number two, willfully ignorant, or number three, just being flat dishonest. I'll let you choose. All right. The growth of, look, just on Facebook, and don't make the mistake of believing or saying that Facebook constitutes the totality of the preterist movement. I mean, for crying out loud. But the growth of preterist Facebook pages and the numbers of subscribers to those pages is just growing and growing and growing and growing. I know one of them has almost 10,000 members. Now, 10 years ago, I don't think you could find a Facebook page that had maybe 500. And now all of a sudden, we're finding this. We're seeing Spanish-speaking preterist websites with 1,500, 2,000 plus. I mean, we're just seeing exponential growth in the preterist movement. And so let me reiterate my point here. When the enemies of preterism, full preterism, I still like the term true preterism better because that's what it is. It's true preterism, okay? But when they start spouting off and when they start claiming, well, preterism is dying out, there's 14 members of it. That's just argumentum ad desperatum. Okay, back to our topic. The feast days of Israel and what they foreshadowed. Remember, Paul, in writing of the feast days, said, let no man judge you in respect of new moons, feast days, and Sabbaths, which are present active, what he wrote in 62 AD, approximately. They are a shadow of good things about to come. Now that about to is translated from the Greek word melo in the infinitive, thus milein, or meluntes, or whichever cognate. About to come. Every Greek lexicon. And by the way, if you want a good study of this, just do a search on the internet of Bill Mounce, who is one of the world famous Greek scholars today. Bill Mounce on melo. And so when detractors want to say, well, melo cannot mean about to be because I found a place where it doesn't mean that. Oh, geez. I'm sorry, that's just the worst sort of hermeneutic. It's It's just really horrible. But nonetheless, Paul said that the new moons, feast days, and Sabbaths were, when he wrote, shadows of good things that were about to be fulfilled. Meaning imminently, about to be. So I've been sharing with you of how the day of judgment was foreshadowed by Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, and that from the day of Pentecost onward, the New Testament writers, and the farther along chronologically that you go, the more urgent the expectation of the judgment becomes. This is really a fascinating reality. So I asked you yesterday to please study 1 Peter chapter 4. Okay, 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 5. Peter said, writing in the mid-60s, all right, perhaps early, but he said that Christ was ready to judge the living and the dead. Ready is from the Greek word hitoimos. Now, hitoimos has a dual meaning. I should point out that Alfred's Greek Testament says that the Greek reader of hitoimos would understand that to be speaking of the imminent judgment. Okay, widely recognized Greek source, hitoimos would indicate the imminent judgment. Well, hitoimos is also used in what we will call a moral sense. That is to say, it is someone who is morally prepared to do something, whatever it might be. But morally prepared doesn't exclude temporally ready. In Revelation chapter 21, John says, I saw a new Jerusalem coming down from God out of heaven as a bride adorned, prepared for her husband. Now, if the bride is prepared for the wedding, prepared for the husband, you don't really think of something like, oh yeah, I'm prepared for my husband. He may not get here 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years or 2,000 years, but hey, I'm ready. You bet, I'm ready. Do you think the bride putting on her wedding dress has in mind that the wedding is not going to take place for decades, for generations? You know that's silly. And so the imagery, by the way, of the bride, the imagery of the wedding throughout the New Testament is that it was going to happen in the first century. Oh, in conjunction with the fall of Jerusalem, Matthew chapter 22. In direct consequence of and subsequent to, immediately, on the destruction of Babylon, the city where the Lord was crucified. Revelation chapter 19 and verse 6. And so you have this Greek word, hitoimos, meaning not only morally prepared, but temporally ready. And you have Peter saying that Christ, when Peter wrote, was ready to judge the living and the dead. Now, it's interesting that some modern translations are really acknowledging the temporal imminence that is found in the text. And they're rendering like, is on the point of judging the living and the dead. Or he is about to. Because they recognize that hitoimos indicates imminence. But that's not all. Look at 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 7. The end of all things has drawn near. When I did the review of Steve Gregg's book, Why Not Full Preterism, I pointed out that Steve Gregg says, well, this is a problematic text, I'm paraphrasing, Because very clearly, if Peter was saying that the end of time was near, then he was clearly wrong. Well, yeah, but he wasn't predicting the end of time. No New Testament writer ever predicted the end of time. That's just not something that they did. See if I can adjust that just a tiny bit. Maybe that helps, okay? So then Steve admits, well, he may actually be referring to the events of AD 70. Well, thank you. Point of fact is, there was an end coming in the first century that was to come at the completion of the Great Commission. This gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to the nations. Then comes the end. Well, I wonder if that's the end of 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 7. If it's not, I wonder why. Where's the evidence to prove that? Now, is it theoretically possible that Matthew 24:14 is talking about one end and that Peter's talking about another? Well, of course it's theoretically possible. But Peter heard Jesus talk about the preaching of the gospel to all the world, and when it was done, then comes the end. Peter heard Jesus say, many will come in my name saying, I am he, and the end has drawn near. Do not believe them. So Peter heard Jesus' warnings about premature declarations of the nearness of the end, and yet here's Peter in that same generation saying the end of all things has drawn near. Now, ask yourself this question, folks. Was Peter becoming one of the very false prophets that Jesus warned him not to be or not to believe? Here's Jesus saying, some folks are going to come saying, I am he, and the end is drawn near. Don't believe them. Don't go after them. But here's Peter later in that very identical generation, after the fulfillment of the Great Commission, saying, the end is drawn near. You know, I made this observation with one individual, and they said, well, yeah, but it's different. What Jesus was warning about was somebody saying, I am the Messiah. Oh, so as long as a person doesn't say they are Jesus, it's okay for them to say the end is drawn near. Argumentum ad desperatum. Oh, but we're not done. So we have Peter. Christ was ready to judge the living and the dead. The end of all things is drawn near. And in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 17, the time has come for the judgment. Now, let me make some observation here. In the Greek, it is literally the time. It is the kairos, the appointed, designated time. And it is not the appointed time. I wonder what day for the judgment had been appointed. Acts chapter 17, 30 and 31. The times of this ignorance, i.e. the idolatry of the Athenians, God winked at, but now commands all men everywhere to repent. For, here's the reason why, he has appointed a day in which he is about to judge. So here's Acts 17. Here is an appointed judgment that was about to take place. Here is Peter writing, not too far removed from Paul in Acts 17, saying Christ was ready to judge the living and the dead. The end had drawn near, and now he's saying the time has come. The appointed time has come, watch this, for the judgment, to krino, Now, here's a little Greek lesson for the day. This was pointed out to me by a young fellow by the name of Jeremy Lyles some years ago. It is a profound argument. I never discovered it on my own. Jeremy pointed it out to me himself. In the Greek, in the use of the definite article, and by the way, this is found in Daniel Wallace's Beyond the Basics Greek Grammar, book about that thick. He points out the use of what is known as the anaphoric article. Anaphoric, A-N-A-P-H-O-R-I-C, the anaphoric article. What in the world is an anaphoric article? Well, number one, Daniel Wallace says it is by far the preponderant use of the definite article in the Greek language. Okay, what does that mean? The anaphoric article is used by a speaker or by a writer when they mention a subject. Okay, they mention a subject. Subject's up here. They continue to discuss that subject, and then to call attention back to the subject, they use the definite article. Here's what that means. That means that Peter introduced the subject of the judgment or of judgment in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 5. In verse 17, he says the appointed time for that very judgment, the judgment that he had just mentioned. What is the judgment that he had just mentioned? It was the resurrection, the judgment at the resurrection. And Peter says the appointed time, and the Greek construction here demands that it be read, the time has come. It is literally the time is. It is the time for the appointed time for the judgment of verse 5. Look, folks, you couldn't find a more explicit, a more emphatic declaration that the time for the judgment had arrived. Or you got to go to Bible Gateway. Do yourself a favor. Look up 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 17 in all English translations. All of them render it as the time has arrived, or something similar, for the appointed judgment. So from Pentecost until Peter, we have the declaration, the expectation of the imminent arrival of the judgment. There is no 2,000-year gap in their expectation or in their declaration. It is a gross abuse of language and of the Greek to try to have Peter saying, well, the judgment is always ready. No. The appointed time for the judgment of the living and the dead had arrived when Peter wrote. I'm out of time. Thank you for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. Be sure to join me Friday for my Responding to the Critics as we continue our examination of the book, The Future of Rome. And then Friday night, as Mike Sullivan and I continue our, just absolutely fascinating study of Deuteronomy 32 as the foundation for biblical eschatology. We'll be looking at Daniel chapter 7 in this regard. I'll see you there.